Yeah, you're straight on. That's great. That one's rolling. That one's rolling. Just speak into that for a second.
Hi, this is Jeff Rubin.
Is it ever?
Everything good?
Everything's good.
Okay. Do you want me to hold the mic? Or?
No, I'll go back and forth like a streeter.
Okay.
And I can make sure it gets.
So I should just look at the camera and not at you, or should I look at you?
No, let's just have a conversation just between us.
Okay.
I mean, you can look at the camera if you want
Okay.
to address the Canadian people.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So we start out all the interviews the same way. You say your name, and we're doing streeters the same way. Or people say, go up to people and say, well, say your name, and you just finish the sentence, in my Canada, or my Canada includes, or my Canada. Let's see, can you?
Okay. My name is Jeff Rubin, and in my Canada, a lot of things have gone wrong.
Oh, that's a loaded statement. So what? What's going wrong?
Well, particularly the economy, and I am an economist. I used to be the chief economist of CIBC World Markets, and now I've written 3 books about the economy. The latest being The Carbon Bubble, and that's all about the Canadian economy. And while it's a global story, unfortunately, we're at the epicenter of it, because our supposedly engine of economic growth, the oil sands, is what's already dragged the economy into a recession. And I think that we've seen our pursuit, or the Prime Minister's pursuit, of becoming an energy superpower seriously distort the way our economy operates these days.
So why do you say that? Why is that?
Well, I mean, we sort of bet the house on this development of this super high cost resource called the oil sands. I mean, yeah, there's billions of barrels of oil under the muskeg there, but it's some of the highest cost oil in the world. And if you look at today's market, I mean, the price that oil sand producers get, Western Canadian Select, it's like under $20 US. I mean, at today's world, that means totally changes the discussion about pipelines. Pipelines don't have an economic context, because the huge expansion that was planned for the oil sands makes no economic sense, and no one's going to fund that. Even more challenging, much of the 2 million barrels a day that we're currently digging out of there is at a huge loss, and hence unsustainable. Far from expanding, that sector's going to have to shrink, and with it some horrendously expensive cleanup costs.
So just turn off the tap?
Well, it's not so easy to turn off the tap in the oil sands. That's the problem. With some of these shale formations that are also high cost and will have to close down, it's easy. They lose about half their production in a year from depletion, so you just stop fracking and you produce less. Not with an oil sand mine. These mines were built for 50 years. They're billions and billions of dollars of sunk costs. But not only does it make no sense to build anymore, we're going to have to take some out of production. And that's going to be billions of dollars of reclamation costs. Those tailing ponds, those sulfur stacks, they don't reclaim themselves. And I think with the kind of financial stresses that falling oil prices will bring, unfortunately, I think the Alberta taxpayer will be on the hook for most of those costs.
So our series is looking at Canadian values. What values are being tested by that?
Well, I think illusions. Okay, I think the illusion that we could be an energy superpower with high cost oil, and that would justify overriding all kinds of environmental regulations, that would justify the currency going up to levels that were uncompetitive for the rest of the economy, that would justify all kinds of arm twisting to get pipelines that were called as important as building the national railway in terms of nation building exercise. All of those have been exposed as fictions, and fictions that have seriously distorted and harmed the Canadian economy. And so I think that our whole master plan of becoming the Saudi Arabia of the North, instead of an engine of economic growth, if you look at both the economy or what the stock market is saying about oil sands stocks, they're looking every day more and more like stranded assets.
Wow. So that's sort of dire predictions. So I guess the Canadian value that it's being tested is truth, or
Well, you know, I think the Canadian value that is going to be tested is resilience, because I think that this bursting of the carbon bubble is a unique opportunity to press the reset button for the Canadian economy. And a big part of pressing the reset button on the Canadian economy is going from the parity exchange rate of the Canadian petrodollar to the 70-cent exchange rate that's right around the corner. And we're going to find that just as the petrodollar drove away millions of manufacturing jobs because we no longer could be competitive at that exchange rate, the bursting carbon bubble and the deflating Canadian dollar, I think, is going to breathe new life into a lot of industries that we thought were gone for good.
Like?
Like manufacturing, for example, of which we lost over 500,000 jobs. And by the way, they didn't go to China. They went to the United States. Now, maybe it was because of China that oil and resource prices drove up the Canadian dollar. But most of those jobs crossed the border, and I'm talking everything from auto assembly to food processing. Those jobs are going to come back. And while the oil sands and the resource sector is going to shrink, I think in the economy that's going to emerge from the ashes of a burst carbon bubble is going to be a more diversified economy and a more sustainable one than the resource economy that has performed so poorly for Canadians in the last couple of years.
So it's not all doom and gloom?
No, I think we're turning the corner. And I think, from the carbon bubble, from the bursting of that bubble, we're going to see some game-changing events in the economy that are going to spur the development of industries that have long languished in the shadow of the oil boom.
Well, Harper's really hitched his wagon to the oil boom.
He certainly has. In fairness, a lot of company, okay? A lot of company. I mean, wasn't it just last month that the premiers, including Ontario Premier Wynne, was talking about how important it is to get Energy East built? I don't think Premier Wynne's aware of the fact that there's going to be no oil to supply that Energy East pipeline, so she doesn't have to fuss with approving it or not. No one's going to build it.
Well,
or for that matter, any of the other pipelines, whether it's Keystone XL or Northern Gateway, because the economic context for those pipelines has changed dramatically. Those pipelines were all about a massive expansion of production. What the market is telling the oil sands, what market prices are telling the oil sands, is to shrink, not grow.
Can you put Canada in a larger context, a global context? We're really tied to the American economy and surrounding economies. How are they changing? How are they adapting to
Well,
this?
I would argue that we've been really more tied to the Chinese economy. Because if you look at why oil got to triple-digit oil prices, and not just oil, but coal, copper, all of it was because of the juggernaut Chinese economy that was single-handedly driving global growth and rising commodity prices. And what that did was made us very uncompetitive with what you mentioned, our traditional trading partner, which is the US, because that was more trade of manufactured goods than resource trade. And when, the oil sands drove the dollar up to parity, it's not a surprise that all of a sudden everybody from Heinz to GM is pulling out of Ontario because it just didn't make sense to produce here, okay? I think that's all changing. I think, the slowdown in China, the slowdown in global growth, the crash in commodity prices, not just oil prices, but, copper prices, nickel prices, coal prices, again, is a unique opportunity for us to press the reset button and, address some of the ways in which our economy has become hugely distorted, particularly to oil in the last 4 to 5 years. So I'm not sure if this is so much a political adjustment, but it's certainly going to be an economic and market adjustment. And probably, given the closeness of the oil story with the Harper government, may well could be a political change as well.
Well, certainly, let me, speaking of pressing the reset button, this thing only records for 15 minutes at a time. So we just make sure. I still got another 5 minutes of it.
Okay, I think we can probably do it.
We could probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I wonder,
I think it changes, where we're seeing growth. I mean, in the last 5-6 years, the dividing line between haves and have-nots has always been about who has oil. And even Newfoundland, that used to be your classic have-not, is a have because of the offshore oil industry. And Ontario, of course, became a have-not. People talk about the Dutch disease, like how the exchange rate killed manufacturing. The big difference is the Netherlands is a tiny country. The oil industry is right next to the manufacturing industry. In Canada, they're very different parts of the country. So that shift had huge regional implications, okay? And I think we're going to see it shift back. I think we're going to see growth come back more to the center. I think as growth returns to things like the manufacturing sector and oil starts to play a much smaller role in our economy. I think, the challenge for Alberta is the old extraction model doesn't work. They're not going to be able to dig out 5 million barrels a day. Their challenge is to do more with what they're already digging out. Okay, and one of the huge problems Alberta has been how much they've left on the table by not going up the processing chain and refining. Because if you look at the price gap between what they get, Western Canadian Select, and the price of refined products like petroleum, jet fuel, diesel, they're leaving billions on the table.
well, good for their long-term future, perhaps.
Well, they've had a change in government. Maybe they'll have a change in direction.
Yeah, it could be. You used to be known as a person who was talking about prices going at 100 barrels, $150 a barrel, and that's changed. How has that? Did you foresee what was going on?
Well, I probably was the first person in this country to forecast triple-digit oil prices back in 2005, and that was really about depletion of supply, depletion of low-cost supply. And you know what? People say the world's awash with oil. The world's not awash with oil. The world's awash with high-cost oil. OPEC's still producing the same 30 million barrels that they were back when I was forecasting that. It's all been, the oil sands, the Bakken, Brazilian subsalt, deep water. And what I learned from the days of making those forecasts is, we need triple-digit oil prices to get that kind of oil out of the ground. But those same triple-digit oil prices kill economic growth and kill the demand for oil. And everywhere you look now, and China's like the latest example, growth's a fraction of the pace that it was before the last recession. Then if you consider what my latest book is about, the carbon bubble, that actually we don't have room to consume more oil. We're going to have to consume less oil. Then I think the consequences are pretty clear. Sure, Saudi Arabia will still be producing oil, Iraq will still be producing oil, but if the world's got to consume 12 million barrels less over the next decade and a half, guess who's not going to be producing oil?
Right. Okay.
The highest cost sources. And guess who they are? Us.
And we're mortgaged to the hilt.
And we're mortgaged to the hilt, but right now, you might say we're deleveraging in a hurry.
Well, that's good. Well, thank you very much. I think that says it, don't you? Is there anything more you care to say to the Canadian people?
I think we've basically covered it all. Great talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you. Yeah.
Okay, so is that good?
That's great. I think it's, we could go on and natter about all kinds of stuff.
I think we covered the basics here.
With talking to Paul this morning was so different because here's a man who dives into the minutiae of legal principles. He did this analysis of